Next question from the
that's where we're going to leave the National Press Club in Canberra, focusing today on issues of human rights and detention arrangements, with the international visitor being Salil Shetty, the Secretary-General of Amnesty International. And as they were indicating there, a few politicians in the audience will have to make their way up to Parliament House, where we are, to attend question time at 2 o'clock. But we have a few issues of the day to update you on between now and question time, because the political parties have been holding their regular meetings here in Parliament House today. Leaks came up in the government meeting. A conscience vote on gay marriage did not. Even so, pro and anti same-sex marriage camps are forming within the Liberal Party. And one side is none too happy that ministers on the other side are finding a voice against the party's current marriage policy.
We did see comments last night on Q&A, and as I say, I don't think that that's helpful.
We need to have a constructive debate. We'll have that in the party room at the right time.
We'll explain that and look a little further into it too. Also today, we're told the government's most senior ministers have had a come to Jesus moment. We've searched the theological text, spoken to a few MPs, and we intend to explain what it means today on Capitol Hill. Well, the Liberal Party's in a holding pattern on same-sex marriage, and it's testing patience all round. Backbenchers and ministers alike are declaring their support for either a conscience vote or for gay marriage itself. Victorian Liberal Sarah Henderson is the latest. She, on a night when the Assistant Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, predicted a majority in the Liberal Party, now wants a free vote on this issue. But for every action, there's a reaction, and Senator Zed Seselja has stepped forth to demand ministers toe the current party position on marriage.
Surprise! It's a beautiful night. I made a commitment that I wouldn't make my position known until the issue came before the party room. So I've spent a long time consulting, meeting with hundreds of people, and I think there is definitely a shift, not just in Corangamite, but across the nation.
I know that she is one of many Liberal and National MPs who are supporters of marriage equality, who would be very pleased to debate this in the Federal Parliament and indeed vote in favour of marriage equality.
But I do think perhaps there are now enough people in the party room to support a free vote or a conscience vote. I'm obviously wanting to see a free vote because I want to see every member of Parliament, including of course the Executive, be able to have a free vote on this issue. I do think, and I think Josh Frydenberg made this comment last night, there's a feeling amongst us that perhaps the numbers are now there to support a free vote in our party room.
I, like many of the other local members in the Parliament, have met with a number of constituents, and my views have evolved after meeting with constituents and seeing the deep affection that people of same-sex relationships have for each other.
We did see comments last night on Q&A, and as I say, I don't think that that's helpful.
I'm hoping that we have a conscience vote in our party.
Are the numbers there in your party room for a conscience vote?
Well, I think they are.
I don't think we should have a situation where ministers go against party policy, because if they can do it on same-sex marriage, they can publicly do it on any number of other issues.
Who cares, baby? I think I want to marry you.
Well, we are going to look at Zed Cecilia's argument around ministerial solidarity on this issue, but it's also worth, before we do that, looking back at something that the Prime Minister established as a position on this. He long ago, Tony Abbott, granted a degree of freedom for ministers to say what they like on this subject of gay marriage. Soon after taking office in 2013, Malcolm Turnbull's arch-enemy, Cory Bernardi, had suggested the minister be sacked for speaking out in favour of same-sex marriage. But the Prime Minister felt that this was an unusual issue, so unusual that ministers would be allowed room to express their views.
This is a rather unusual subject, and I think on a subject such as this, there is a certain leeway extended to people. We've had a pretty broad-ranging debate in the community, and you wouldn't be surprised if it was a pretty broad-ranging debate inside the party. But everyone knows where I stand. I stand for the traditional definition.
So that was Tony Abbott there in December 2013, granting some leeway, to use his word, to ministers. Now, the ACT Senator, Zed Cecilia, is a defender of traditional marriage. We got him to elaborate on why he thinks ministers should show restraint and on general ground rules for the debate now underway. Well, Zed Cecilia, the Liberal Party has a policy position currently on marriage, but it's in a state of flux. Would you acknowledge that?
Well, there's clearly a lot of discussions taking place, and that's happened in the community, and of course that would be happening within the Liberal Party. But you're right, we have a position, and that's been a long-standing position. It's been a position that was, I guess, formalised in 2004, but effectively has been with us for decades. And I think that we should respect the fact that we have a party position. We don't, when we have a party position on other issues, we don't see, for instance, Cabinet Ministers going out and taking a contrary view publicly.
Right, so you're arguing that they should all be bound, these ministers, by the position that currently exists, that there's no latitude for them to express a contrary view publicly?
Well, I would say that this should be treated like other issues that we have a position on. So if we're going to allow it when it comes to the debate over marriage, then there really is no reason why you wouldn't allow it on a whole range of other issues, because obviously, and the argument that has been put is that, well, this is a particularly difficult issue or this is a controversial issue. Well, I accept that it's a controversial issue. What I would say, though, is there are many issues we deal with in politics that are. We often, or most often, have a party position on those issues, and we generally, particularly senior ministers, would stick to that position and support that position.
And what's provoked you to make these observations today? Was it Josh Frydenberg's appearance on Q&A? Is it Malcolm Turnbull, who has made other appearances previously?
Well, obviously, I think, and I don't want to single out Josh. I think there was, obviously, last night was the latest example. And look, Josh is a good friend of mine, and so I'm not singling him out. I think there's been, as you say, other examples, and last night was really just the latest.
How do you have a mature and respectful debate if a good proportion of senior politicians on one side are muzzled publicly in that debate?
Well, no one's saying that anyone should be muzzled, but what I am saying is we shouldn't be saying that this issue is that different, that the normal rules don't apply. And so all I would say is, if we're going to have the debate, have it in the usual way. If it's a party position, which it is, then make your case as to why that should be changed. But that generally, for cabinet ministers or for ministers generally, they would make that case internally and make that case as to why it should be changed. I would say that it would be a very odd position for the Liberal Party to get to if we didn't have a position on marriage, because remember, when we talk about things like a free vote in the Liberal Party, traditionally that has been for issues where there is no formal Liberal Party position. So we would be moving to a situation, if some in the party were to prevail, where we have effectively no position on marriage.
Where do you think the numbers would stand currently on the free vote, no free vote question, which is the first one that arises?
I think that's difficult to gauge, because I don't think anyone's done any sort of detailed count. But what I would say is the sense I get from my colleagues is there is still overwhelming support for our party position. I think that's a position we took to the last election. That's a position we've taken to many elections, and of course many of our strongest supporters would want us to hold on to that.
Is there a view, or is an explanation for why you're saying what you're saying today, driven by the belief that defenders of traditional marriage within the coalition have been a little bit passive, haven't been out there countering the momentum perception. The momentum perception being that lots of people are ready to jump and get on board for same-sex marriage.
Well, I think that's probably a fair comment to some degree. Obviously, I think we often hear individual ministers or members expressing their view, and they've traditionally, for the most part, they've expressed the view in line with the party position. But no doubt more of the public advocacy on the issue when it comes to ministers has been in favour of same-sex marriage, when, of course, that does go contrary to our party position.
I'm reminded in 2013 when Corey Bernardi was effectively asking for Malcolm Turnbull to be sacked for making comments about same-sex marriage. The Prime Minister said this is a rather unusual subject, and I think on a subject such as this, there is a certain leeway extended to people. Do you think your own leader has really allowed the freedom for ministers to express these views publicly?
Well, look, I wasn't particularly familiar with those comments, but look, obviously it certainly has gone on. I'm expressing a view which I'm sure would be shared by many, and I'm sure it would be shared by many in the Cabinet, that actually, we have a party position, and there doesn't seem any particular reason to treat this issue differently. We all acknowledge that it's an important issue to many people on both sides of the debate. It should be handled respectfully, but we should recall and remember that we do have a party position on it. If people want to change that position, they're free to make that argument, but there's a proper way to do it.
And do you think this argument that you're putting probably accelerates the timing when the Liberal Party gets down in that room and has a discussion about a conscience vote?
I don't think it necessarily does. Obviously, at some point, the Prime Minister has said that this will be considered by the party room. As I say, I still get the sense that the overwhelming majority of our party room supports our party position. There are some who don't, but obviously it's up to those who have a differing view to make their case.
Are you organising, coordinating, strategising at all with like-minded people in defence of the status quo?
I wouldn't necessarily put it like that, but I think certainly, obviously there would be discussions going on.
And were we likely to see coordinated action as the debate unfolds?
I think it's probably getting ahead of it, but obviously at some point there will be a discussion in the party room, and there will be a debate in the party room, and we'll have to make a decision as a party as to whether we reaffirm our party position, our long-held party position, or whether we choose to take a different position. Effectively, I think what certainly some people are arguing, that would leave us with no position on marriage. I don't see that as being tenable.
All right, said Cecilia. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Now, Liberals and Nationals who aren't involved in Senate estimates hearings have held their regular Tuesday party room gatherings today, and our reporter James Glenday's been getting across who said what at the Coalition's joint parties meeting. And James, tackling the issue of Cabinet national security leaks is delicate in the party room, particularly when the party room itself has a tendency to leak or brief out afterwards. But how was it handled today?
Well, according to several MPs, Tony Abbott did make it very clear that leaking would not be tolerated at all, and that there would be indeed consequences for anyone who decided to breach Cabinet solidarity and Cabinet confidentiality. A lot of the people there actually said it was quite a relatively boring meeting because, as you've mentioned, half of all the senators, or most of the senators, certainly weren't there because they're at Senate estimates. But Tony Abbott's comments are in relation to those quite spectacular leaks that were printed in Fairfax at the weekend of last week's cabinet split over citizenship laws, and a couple of people in the party room have said privately that this has hurt them in their electorates, and the member for Parkes, Mark Coulton, actually stood up and said that it had damaged the government, these leaks, and then the Prime Minister revealed that during last night's Cabinet meeting, ministers had what he essentially called a come-to-Jesus moment.
Right, a come-to-Jesus moment. It's got a currency around this place today, but initially its meaning was lost on most everyone who wasn't there. But what have you been able to establish about the Prime Minister's intent with those words?
I think it was lost on even some of the people who were there. A couple said that they didn't hear it. Others said they thought they'd misheard. One said, "Hallelujah, we're all saved." So, I mean, there's a few differing observations from this comment. But I think the agreed meaning seems to now be that come to Jesus means that Cabinet Ministers have seen the light, realised the error in their leaking ways. Whether or not that's actually true will be very interesting to see.
It would be an unusual cabinet if it held on to that Jesus moment forever and didn't again leak in the future. And the general mood in that party room, moving on from the budget, obviously still trying to pass bills related to the budget, but they entered that meeting today with a marginal improvement in news poll, up 1 point. How does that feed into sentiment around the meeting?
Well, I think it makes everyone who I've spoken to said it was more upbeat than it was a few months ago, which is unsurprising. A lot of politicians might say that polls don't matter, but of course that's well and truly a lie. And the MPs I've been speaking to have said that the mood inside the party room has grown progressively over the past few months, in line virtually with these tiny and sometimes incremental polling movements, but I think there's a general widespread view now that the government is heading in the right direction following the budget, and I guess if you're in a marginal seat, that always makes you a little bit happier, doesn't it?
And there's always prayer if the polls don't work. James
Divine
Glendale,
intervention.
thank you for that update. Well, reports from Indonesia suggest that asylum seeker turnback operations are in full swing still. Police there say a boat with 65 asylum seekers crashed onto a reef in the southeast of the archipelago. Now, we may never know, as the Australian government's policy to not confirm on-water activities still remains, but that hasn't stopped the Greens making points about it.
Rather than showing any helping hand, all we've seen from this government is further pushbacks of people on board these boats. I mean, they must have been terrified, the children on board. And what does the government think about that? Nothing. They simply don't care. Tony Abbott's message is not to the people smugglers. Tony Abbott's message is to the world's refugees, and it is simply this: bugger off and die somewhere else. That is what Tony Abbott thinks of these people.